Welcome to the Possibility Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton, aka Possibilityman. We're committed to bringing you guests who strive to better people's lives and serve as a force for good in the world. Our guest today is Dr.CindyM.Howard. She is a board-certified chiropractic internist and nutritionist. She's also a professional speaker and the author of a new book as of 2023, Positively Altered, Finding Happiness at the Bottom of the Chemo Bag. Dr. Howard, welcome to the show today.
Oh, thank you. It's such a privilege. It's great to spend some time with you.
Okay, look, I've been looking forward to this opportunity for a few months now, so I got a ton of questions to ask. But first, it's a reminder to our listeners and our viewers. Follow, like, and share this podcast wherever you find it. Your support matters. It helps us attract guests like Dr. Howard. So, look, my first question, this is the Possibility Action Network. We're always curious about how people get into the career that they're in. So how did you come about being a chiropractic doctor? How did it happen for you?
It's a great question, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a lengthy answer because there's definitely a story. And what I would love to tell you is I had this amazing experience growing up, and I come from a, generation of chiropractic physicians, and I don't have any of that. So you go back to my younger years in school, and I was always involved in dance and in sport and very active in that community. And when I went to college, I decided to major in exercise physiology. Well, when you graduate with a degree in exercise physiology, at the time, there were not a lot of amazing opportunities. So I felt that I needed to go a little bit further, and I had decided to become a physical therapist. Well, like a lot of great doctors in my field, some of us don't always have great grades, and we know more than the tests show. So when I applied at the time for physical therapy school, I couldn't get in. It was extremely competitive. I just didn't have the grades. And at the time, they didn't care about an interview or anything else. It was purely the piece of paper you submitted to get accepted. So I stepped out of school, and on my father's recommendation, he said, go into sales. You're going to be great at it. And I went, okay, because I didn't know what else to do. And I got my very first job out of college, which was the best and worst job I have ever had. And what I did is I was reselling long distance services, nothing to do with exercise or sport. Made a lot of money, spent a lot of money, and thought, oh, I just don't want to do this for the rest of my life. So in talking to a few people still in the industry, and it's sort of a joke, but they said, why would you want to go to physical therapy school and be told what to do by other practitioners? Because at the time, that's really how physical therapy worked. And instead, you could go to chiropractic school and tell other people what to do. And I thought, oh, I'd really love to tell other people what to do. And I was sold. So I looked into chiropractic school in the state of Illinois because that's where I lived, and I didn't want to relocate at the time. And we have one university. And I applied and got in, and, as they say, the rest is history. And that's really how I got into chiropractic medicine initially.
Oh, that's interesting. And your father saw a good deal in you because he said, look, sales, so it means that there's something about your communication skills and the like. And you're surely demonstrating that as a public speaker, which we'll talk about a little later.
Well, it was either that or he wanted me out of the house and wanted to stop supporting me, right? He needed me to get a job that made some money. So, the checks stopped coming, right? We've got to get the kids on their own eventually. So maybe a little bit of both.
Indeed, indeed. Hey, look, in my introduction of you, I mentioned that you're a board certified chiropractic internist and nutritionist. Firstly, what does it mean to be board certified?
Right. So it's a specialty that within the profession, you take extra coursework, hours and hours and hours of extra coursework, and then you have to prove clinical competency in that subject, both via a written exam. So there goes that test again, and a clinical exam as well. So that was really important to me to make sure that I passed both those things in order to get a few extra letters behind my name. But it gave me really a niche within the profession to look at. So we're underneath chiropractic, we can go just straight chiropractic musculoskeletal work. We can go radiology, we can go orthopedics, we can go neurology, or in my case, I did internal medicine and nutrition. So it was a way to take that branch, just as they do in the medical field, of having a specialty underneath the main heading of the degree that we earn.
Yeah, and you're more than just a practitioner. you head organizations, and gosh, so in administrating, how did you get involved with that? What attracted you to, for example, to head the Chiropractic Association in your state? What pulled you in that direction?
Oh, well, what I do, and I'd love to take credit for running it, but I don't. I serve as the American Chiropractic Association Illinois delegate. So think of it as being a state senator, however, way less glamorous and way less way less work from that standpoint, but within the professional organization. So I represent all the doctors in Illinois on a national level. And, part of our goal is to facilitate policy and improve relationships, let's say with insurance carriers or reimbursement for patients, and just, how to improve that doctor-patient experience.
Understood. Hey, look, I'm going to jump right into your book. The other questions I have will have to follow this, but this book has, this is the most provocative title I've seen in a long time: Positively Altered, and then Finding Happiness at the Bottom of a Chemo Bag. Why did you write this book, Dr. Howard?
Yeah, well, so almost 10 years ago, I found a lump in my neck, and that lump turned out to be a swollen lymph node. And I thought, oh, this is really weird. I'm not sick. Well, you fast forward through a series of tests that I ran on myself and walking through this journey where I self-diagnosed Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I had a pretty big speed bump that I needed to run over in my life. And I kept a journal, which is now this book, the memoir of my experiences through that journey, all the way from self-diagnosis to the end of the final treatment, and then even some postscript to that. And the book really became very important to me because what I realized was where it was very therapeutic for me to get through that journey, it also delivers a lot of great messages that challenge a lot of the things that I think patients walk through, and not always in a good way, right? So for instance, the language, when we hear the word cancer, is a very scary word to most people. And instead of looking at that in a way of saying, okay, I've got something that I didn't ask for, didn't want, but how do we turn it into a positive, find the gifts, overcome the challenge, and really learn from it? I felt was very important because a lot of us really struggle with how to do that. Mm-hmm. So the book is really my message on finding the gifts and the adversity. And it doesn't have to be cancer. It really can be any adversity that comes our way, because it's coming. It's coming.
Was that your initial response, or was your initial response something else, to the actual diagnosis?
It's a great question. And I think the initial response was sort of one of just, it was almost robotic, because this is what I do for a living, right? I diagnose. So it wasn't weird, right? To say, oh, by the way, here are the test results. This is what it shows. And here's what's going to come. So I was in sort of this robotic mode, I think, at first of, okay, I got to take this on. And then there was an interesting dichotomy, because I would love to tell you I had no moments of self-pity, and that's not true, because they definitely came. But I'm usually a pretty typical, like, okay, let's just, I love a challenge. I love the competition, and I love to overcome. So I thought, no, you know what? I've got to do this. The other interesting thing is my mother was walking through terminal illness at the time. So there was almost a switch that flipped for me too, where I said, you know what? I can't walk down this journey in a bad way, because my mother is on this path too, and she doesn't need to worry about me now. So I've got to turn on my A game and really make this like it's no big deal.
Wow.
In order to help me and to help her get through her journey.
Oh my goodness. I mean, look, I got to pause here for a moment, because you were going through something very serious yourself, and you were thinking about serving somebody else. Where did you develop this sense of such great compassion for others? Is this, let me ask the question this way. Looking back at your life before the diagnosis, were you always this type of person who was in service of someone else, or did you dig deeper?
I would have to say that was always part of my character. I don't know that a diagnosis just flips the switch completely from not compassionate to compassionate. And especially as a physician, I mean, I see some really sick people who have, struggled for a lot of years. And to have that empathy and the ability to listen and absorb and encourage has always been part of my practice. But I've got to give my mother credit, who just for everybody's sake, is no longer with us, but she really, and actually even my grandmother, they just exuded that characteristic of, we put people first, and people are good by nature, and to really see that first before we look at all of the negative things that as humans we tend to judge by. So I really have to give my mother and grandmother credit for leading by example through my entire life. They were just great humans.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, they produced a great person in you for sure. Now,
Thank you.
What did cancer teach you, if anything? And you feel
taught
free
me
to
a
say,
lot.
yeah.
It taught me a lot.
Okay.
It taught me to slow down. I think that was the first reason that I had been, retrospect is easy, right? When you trace back your steps, you can go backward and go, oh, I was working on something all along. And at the time that I diagnosed, mom was walking through this challenge. I was going through a terrible divorce. The dog died of pancreatic cancer. I mean, I had the sob story, and I was working very, very hard and lots of hours. And the first thing was just to stop and listen and pay attention and go, what do I need right now in my life that I'm not honoring, that this diagnosis is going to teach me how to pay attention to? So I think that was the very first thing. The second thing was the importance of people. And I know, as we walk through life, we always aspire for the bigger house and the bigger boat and the vacation and right, all of this stuff in our life. And yet people at that moment became so much more important to me, because I realized who showed up and who I thought would show up that didn't. And it allowed me that gift of really sort of reworking relationships to make them bigger, better, stronger, and eliminate the ones that just didn't serve me. And I think those were two enormous gifts for me.
So looking at the title of this book, and I love the primary title, Positively Altered, how did you come up with that?
It was an accident. A lot of stuff is an accident.
Okay.
So the original working title was Pregnancy is Worse Than Cancer. That was the original. And when I ran that past a few people, I actually really upset some people, because they said, how dare you say that pregnancy is actually worse than cancer? And I said, well, but in my experience, and there's a whole chapter in the book about that, in my experience, it actually was. I had horrible pregnancies. I was sicker through the pregnancies than as my walk through Hodgkin's lymphoma. So my perspective was that. Well, I didn't really want to upset people, and I didn't want to turn people off from writing the book. So a couple of people who were on my team to help me build the brand and work the book launch, we had probably, I don't know, a couple hundred working titles, and I fell in love with none of them. It just, they didn't make sense. They didn't resonate what I thought the story was all about. So I was working with a friend of mine, Johan, who did all of my Dr. Cindy branding, and he sent me this enormous, annoying questionnaire, right, that these branding companies do so that they can represent you well. And as I was describing or answering a question that he had in terms of what I was trying to achieve with my goals, I finished it with, and I hope all of this will allow you to become positively altered. And when I read it out loud, I went, that's it. That's the title that I was looking for. And then the tagline of finding happiness at the bottom of a chemo bag, I really wanted, because I wanted to allude to the fact that there is some funny in this book. Like, we can laugh at some pretty dire situations if we choose to. And there are definitely giggles you're going to get if you walk through the chapters.
Wow. So give us one example of those giggles that someone may discover, if they're open-minded.
Yeah, well, okay. So as absurd as this is going to sound, and this is really one of my favorites, when I sat in the oncologist's office going over my options for treatment, the oncology nurse looked at me and she said, on week 3, you are going to wake up and all of your hair is going to be on your pillow. That was the first time I cried. And I thought, as women, and men too, but especially as women, we identify a lot by our hair. It's important to us. We spend a lot of money coloring it and styling it and coloring it. And I didn't really want to walk through this journey with no hair. The first thing you think about when you see a woman who doesn't have hair, is she sick? And I didn't want to be perceived as being sick. So I invested in what's called cold caps. It's a company out of New Zealand, and you wear these ridiculous hats. They almost look like an old-fashioned football helmet as you put it on your head, and they freeze your head to minus 32 degrees.
Ooh.
You start it before chemo treatment. You wear it for about 7 hours after, and it deters the hair follicles from being attacked so that you don't lose your hair.
Oh.
So, as everybody's probably thinking, well, what's so funny about that? That's not the funny part. The funny part is, and I talk about this in one of the chapters as well in the book, is women spend a lot of money also waxing other body parts to get rid of hair, right? Whether it's mustaches, whether it's genital areas, whether it's legs, right? We spend a ton of money doing that. And what was so ironic and funny to me through this whole experience is I spent thousands of dollars to save the hair on my head, but yet the other parts of my body, I won't show you anything, that you don't want the hair on, right? I still had to write the check and pay to have the money in order to get waxed because the chemo didn't cause that hair to fall out.
Yeah.
So it was the absurdity, right, of that dichotomy of, I wish we could have picked where we lost the hair.
I love your sense of humor. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. We'll talk about your speaking a little later, but let me ask you while you're on this point. Does this story show up in any of your speeches on stage?
Sometimes, right?
Okay.
So depending on the audience or what we're talking about, I'll pull in different aspects of my journey as well as even other people's journeys that I've shared with on the physician side in order to relate, right? So the key in the speaking is really finding what resonates with the audience. What do we hit on so that we can all laugh together and start to change the journey in a more positive direction. But yeah, that's one I share. It's one of my personal favorites anyway.
Yeah. Well, look, it sounds like a very interesting book. Positively Altered. That's a powerful title from my perspective. I would look into health and wellness with you, if that's okay. Health and wellness. And I want to get some insights from the perspective of a chiropractic internist and nutritionist. Firstly, help us understand, what is a chiropractic internist?
Sure. So if you think about going to a general practitioner for anything, I do the same things. However, and this is based on state law, in the state of Illinois where I practice, I will not deliver your baby. I will not write you a prescription for medication, and I will not perform surgery. Anything else is fair game. So whether you're dealing with fatigue or hormone issues, gut problems, the common cold, you name it, somebody with that has probably walked through my door in the last 25 years. And we approach it a little differently. So that the goal is twofold. One is to figure out the underlying reason that you wound up in that state in the first place. So we don't actually treat the disease or necessarily the symptoms. We look for and try to find the underlying cause and treat the underlying cause in order to make the correction. The second part of that then is using both food and proper, what we call nutraceuticals or supplements, in order to help overcome those issues too, eliminating a lot of the side effects that we commonly see with the pharmaceutical medicines.
So now, as a chiropractic nutritionist, did this happen simultaneously? Or
No.
did you? Okay, so tell us about that.
Right. So when I was in school, the way I wound up in the internal medicine realm was I had a very important professor. His name was Dr. Frank Strel. He wound up being my mentor, and he taught obstetrics and gynecology. And I thought, this is weird. Why are chiropractors even talking about this? This is not what I thought it was. Well, come to realize that, again, we are able to practice primary care in the state of Illinois. And he did this complete 180 from me wanting to be a sports chiropractor, all neck and back, and, the occasional ankle and wrist, excuse me, to being a true primary care physician. So when I stepped out of school, I started in what they call a diplomate program. That's how I got the board certification immediately. So it took me 3 years and a bunch of weekends and a lot of testing, and got that diplomate. About a decade, maybe a decade and a half later, what was allowed was all of my education in the internal medicine also encompassed a lot of the nutritional component. So there's also that diplomate where we are allowed to use that current coursework to sit for that board exam. So again, I had to pass another test that was pretty rigorous. And once passing that test, I was awarded those letters as well. So now I can claim the internist and the nutritionist behind my name.
Yeah. So nutrition is important then from your perspective.
Oh, very, very. I really do believe, and this is going to sound like there's a huge dichotomy, excuse me, to this too, that if we truly ate well, I mean, really well, and we gave our body the macro and the micronutrients that we need on a cellular level, and we did it all the time, a good portion of my patient population wouldn't need my help.
Wow.
Because we'd be feeding the body what it needs.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the environment that we live in is so toxic and our food is so lacking nutrients and it's, covered in pesticides and chemicals that, I almost have this joke, and it's going to sound terrible, that like, if I taught you to eat perfectly, you're dead because I have nothing to give you, because there's always something that we're combating, unfortunately, in today's world that, can be construed as a little bit, I'll call it evil, if you will, versus, what we really need to provide nutrients. So it's an interesting balance we have to fight.
I got you. I hear you. Food is great. Vegetables are great, but how they're raised or farmed also determines how beneficial it could be. So let's look at this then. But let's assume that you have access to some good fruits and vegetables. Can fruits and vegetables help a person maintain or deal with less obesity?
Sure. Yeah, we're a population that, number one, overeats, right, in terms of portion. So even if we're eating well, usually we're consuming too much. We're certainly diving into processed foods and sugars and chemicals, and all of those contribute to the increase of fat cells. So when we turn back to, here's how I describe it: things that grow on a tree, grow in the ground, we can pull off a vine, and those are your fruits and vegetables, right? When we focus there, and we can even incorporate some of our meats and our fish, the rate of obesity is absolutely going to go down if we limit portion control and we get back to the basic nutrients that we really do need. We just eat things we don't need.
Yeah, I hear. So what about, and you can pass on anything that I ask you, by the way, but I'm just curious, what about cardiovascular issues? Fruits, vegetables, could it help in that area? Or must we take the pharmaceutical route?
Oh, yeah, no. So that must is a pretty dangerous word. It really is. And my approach with most patients is, if we start to see changes, let's say high blood pressure, elevated cholesterol, right? Anything that starts to show that we're headed down the wrong direction. If I have a patient that 100% will give me that buy-in of, look, we're going to change diet, we're going to change exercise or start to exercise, and we're going to do those things that we know are really important in the first place, and they change, big high five, huge win. We don't have to have any conversation about taking a pill. If they sort of have buy-in, they're not really committed, or it's not completely working, then I'm still a fan of going more of that supplement, that natural route. Really, in our branch of medicine, we have an answer for everything that the pharmaceuticals typically offer most of the time. Now, if you're really, let's say you get down that pathway too far, you walk into the hospital in the middle of a heart attack, certainly I don't have a food that's going to pull you out of that heart attack, right? There is absolutely a time and a place for medical intervention and pharmaceutical drugs. My goal, though, always, again, is to figure out, how did you get there in the first place? How do we reverse that process? And using food really provides, again, the cells exactly what they need to be healthy. It's interesting. Cholesterol gets a very bum rap. We spend a lot of time in this country, and I think even out of this country, writing prescriptions for people who have elevated cholesterol. And yet changing diet and exercise and even some good herbs, it has proven just as effective, if not more effective, without the potential side effects like muscle aches and pains, memory loss, etc. And then what I see happening, and unfortunately I see this a lot, is we're now driving cholesterol so low, only based on that cardiovascular, expectation, that without cholesterol, actually you can't live without cholesterol. So I don't know if you remember back in science class, back in grade school, there was a little picture of a cell with a nucleus and a mitochondria, and you had to label that in order to pass a test in biology class. Well, that little energy center, the mitochondria, needs cholesterol to manufacture energy in the body. So if the cholesterol now is too low, we have trouble producing energy. And then we also have trouble producing certain hormones. So like for men especially, we're seeing a lot of low libido, erectile dysfunction, because if you don't have enough cholesterol to manufacture your testosterone, now we have low testosterone, and now we've got, men and women running into the office wanting other prescription drugs to solve some other challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the problem was really the cholesterol in the first place.
Uh-huh.
So it's an interesting cascade that we see that, again, getting back to that root, no pun intended there, of the fruits, the vegetables, and all of those foods that we need, if we just got them properly, we probably wouldn't see those elevations, of diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol, et cetera, that we see.
Right. Now, there are lots of nutritional programs out there. Do you have a preferred one? I mean, some people are plant-based, some people are something else, some people 80-20. What about you? Or do you have a preferred? Yeah.
Yeah, the one that works
I got you.
is my preference. So it's very interesting. I'll tell you kind of a funny story. So when keto became really big, right? Everybody was on the keto bandwagon. We're losing lots of weight. We're feeling amazing. I thought, I'm going to try this. I'm going to see what it's all about. I want to know what my patients are going to walk through if I recommended it. So I'm actually a really good eater to begin with. So when I went keto, I didn't throw in the ice cream and the bacon. I just increased my good fats, coconuts, eggs, salmon. Still ate very healthy. Within 7 days, I gained 7 pounds and I was crabby.
Wow.
And nobody wants to see me crabby. I am not a good crabby person. So it was interesting. I thought, this is insane, right? Like, this is supposed to be such a great program to feel good on, and especially because I'm eating healthy. So it's interesting, and how I'm going to answer your question is, I went back into my genetic testing and I looked at my genetic makeup from a diet and wellness standpoint. What was very interesting that I sort of forgot about is I don't break down fats well genetically. So when I elevate the amount of fats I was consuming, I wasn't utilizing them because it was too much for my body to handle, which is why I gained the weight and I didn't feel good, emotionally. So to answer your question, it's a really interesting dance because there is no one size fits all. Whatever the latest fad is going to work for a handful of people, and it's not going to work for others. And it really needs to be an individual conversation and sometimes some trial and error to say, okay, if we go with this plan, how do you feel? What does the blood chemistry look like after we do this for, month 2 or 3? And if weight loss or weight gain is the goal and that's working, the energy is outstanding and the blood chemistry looks good, then we found the right plan.
Yeah,
so
I like it.
It's very difficult. It's a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, I like it though. What you're saying is that the plan that works best for you and your genetics and all of this stuff. Yeah, I like that a lot. Okay, so I want you to dig a little deeper into health and wellness from a chiropractic perspective. First, I want to ask you, because there's so many, look, when I was a kid growing up, I only knew about family doctor. I didn't know about all of this, but now we got integrative this, we got functional that, we got, so would you say that natural medicine is a good fit, a good label for you? Or is there another label that identifies you as a doctor?
Yeah. It's funny because depending on what decade we talk about, the labels have changed, right? So natural physician was thrown out. Then we went holistic. Then, now it's functional medicine doctor, which actually is sort of a made up term. There's no degree in functional medicine, so I'm not sure what to call it. quite frankly, natural is an interesting word to me because where we say we use things that are more natural, that is true. But if you look at my shelves in my office, and I stock probably over 600 different products, they're still manufactured products, right? Like somebody had to take the herb and process it and get it into a capsule in order for us to swallow it. So when you look at it from that regard, that word natural is always really hard for me because natural means I walked out to my front yard and pulled that mango off the tree, which by the way, we don't have in Chicago. So I have to relocate for that. But, you pull that mango and you eat it fresh off the tree without the pesticides or the processing. That to me really defines the word natural. So it's tough. It's really, I think it's really hard to describe exactly what we do. And I still love the term physician and I love the term medicine because whether you use a pharmaceutical or a supplement or food, it really is all medicine at the same time.
Gotcha. That's helpful. Great. Okay. So I grabbed the word functional and I applied it to you. So maybe that's the word.
Okay.
Would you say that you work in functional neurology, or does functional mislabel neurology from the work that you do?
Yeah, interesting. So we actually, in our profession, we actually have chiropractic neurologists as well that then I would say practice more functionally. So I don't, I would never claim to be a neurologist. It's not where my training is at, but yet the neurological system within chiropractic is essential to what we do. So when we look at the spine and the nerves that come out of the spine that innervate our skin and our organs and our muscles, the health of all of that is extremely important to what we do. And here's how I describe it. If you live in a house and you have cable TV and you've got the cable box in the backyard, there's a cable that runs right from the backyard to the television that gives you this amazing, great picture. And if you think of the spine that way as your cable box and your nerves, the neurological system, as that cable running through, and your TV is all of those end organs that the nerves innervate, if everything is functioning perfectly, you get this gorgeous picture. And if anything isn't working, the spine, the box, the nerves, or the cable, or even the connection then to that end result, you're going to get a fuzzy picture or no picture. And that's how I define poor health. So from a chiropractic perspective, the neurological system is really essential to what we do to make sure that everything is functioning well.
I like it. I like it. Okay, so I want to talk with you now about patients. I'm not, just stuff, nothing specific here, but from your practice, what are some of the health challenges that patients bring to you?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I would love to give you a rundown of symptoms, but I actually think what's more important right now is their challenges are it's very difficult to find a doctor that gives them time that will listen.
Wow.
We're seeing medicine change where a lot of it is corporate run. It is structured by policy and procedures, and patients walk in and get their 6 minutes. And if they don't get out what they're trying to get out in the 6 minutes, it's almost like a lot of the physicians have moved on to the next patient. So I think really being heard and time is one of their biggest challenges. The second one that I see that then does transfer into what they came in for is really how to resolve the problem. So we've turned into a country, really an environment of Band-Aids, right? You have this symptom, here's your drug, here's your Band-Aid. This doesn't feel good, let's just do surgery and hope that it gets better. And what really needs to be done, in my opinion, goes back to what I've said earlier, is we've got to find that underlying cause. What is that iceberg underneath the ocean that's destroying us that we don't see? And if we don't take the time as practitioners to really dive into that, I find that we do these patients a huge disservice, because we might get them better for a little bit, but they're going to wind up right back in the office in 6 months with the same problem or a new problem because we didn't fix the underlying issue.
But this just strikes me that, I'm not a physician, but it just strikes me that you all are in a difficult situation because, you got a business, you got overhead, let's face it, you got staff. And then how much time reasonably can a physician spend with a patient? I mean, I'm thinking, wait a minute, you got to get it fitted out to pay the bills.
Right. So I'm going to tell you as much time as it takes, but the reason I'm able to do that, and I do that in my practice, was, and this is hard for a lot of people, it was really moving to a fee-for-service type practice. So what happened to me is many years ago, and I almost hate to admit this because it's not a good feeling, but when I was in network for insurance companies, I would be sitting in the room with a patient, and in the back of my head, I would be going, I have to get them out of my room. I'm not being compensated for this. I have to move people through, right? And that's not the reason I became a physician. If I wanted to just make a lot of money, I would have found a different profession where I didn't need the time. Moving to a fee-for-service based practice has been harder for a lot of patients to accept because they have insurance, right? And they want to use it. But when they realize they really do want the time and they really are looking for certain outcomes and they really want somebody who will do the work for them, they are willing to pay. So we moved to a time-based, so to speak, practice where if you take 15 minutes of my time, you're going to pay for it. If you take an hour and a half, you're going to pay for it. And we're very focused and we don't waste anybody's time or money. But this way, it really does allow me to give you the time that you need without in the back of my head going, I can't pay the bills. I have a mortgage that's not going to make it. And nobody needs a doctor thinking that in the back of their head when they're trying to take care of them.
I like it. And gosh, I love that you're so transparent about that. Well, the way it used to be, not the way it is now. So that's awesome. So, COVID has taught us, from my perspective, a lot of things. And one thing that a lot of people talk about these days is the immune system.
Mm-hmm.
So how can a person, but the average Joe, or Jane, how can the average person, Dr. Howard, improve their immune system, their immune health?
Right. So I think there's a lot of things for that. Number one is we have to be exposed. And COVID has taught us not to be. Mm-hmm. And if you look back through our history, excuse me, mm-hmm. So much talking, I have to get my water in.
Sure.
If you look back in our history, 100, 200, 300 years ago, we have learned, we just haven't always paid attention, that exposure is really important. So when we're exposed to germs and dirt and, other children who are sick, that's what helps our immune system recognize something evil that's coming in order to elevate certain blood cells that are trained to fight and will have a memory to fight again when something comes into the system. Mm. So when we don't have exposure and the body then the body allows something new in, it's very stressful, right? When we're born, we actually are born with similar immunity to what our mothers have. We carry that for the first couple years. And then, we start to develop our own. So, the kids that play in the dirt, the kids that are touching things they shouldn't touch, that's what's really helped to start building the immunity. Now, on top of that, I'm going to bring back the good food, right? Okay. We've got to give the body all those tools so it's not fighting all the bad guys. Mm. It's about mental health. It's about taking time for yourself. It's about deep breathing. It's about exercise. It's about eliminating as many toxins in our environment, the chemicals we clean with, the stuff we breathe in. Anything we can do to give the body the good tools and eliminate all the junk, that's going to help stimulate the immune system in such a way that it's prepared. Because really, if we couldn't do what we're designed to do, we'd all probably be dead by the age of 2 with what we're exposed to.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
But if we don't take care of our body, by the time we're 80, eventually the body throws up the white flag and goes, you've beat me up pretty good for 80 years. I'm done. I lose. So we have to keep taking care of ourselves through all of the decades to make sure that we stay strong enough, because the way we should all go is we all go to sleep over the age of 100 and don't just wake up. Right. Not from disease.
Right.
And it's a lifelong process, really. I mean, there isn't a magic pill. There isn't a magic quick answer. It's a lifelong journey of making good choices.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said something that's so important, and everything that you've said is important, by the way. But I don't want people to overlook this one, because along with what you were sharing just then, you mentioned mental health, and I connected it immediately to physical health. So tell us more about what you mean by that.
Right. So when you look at our mental health or our brain's capacity to respond appropriately, meaning it's okay to be sad and it's okay to be happy, and there are moments that we have different emotions. But if we fall into a state of true depression or constant anxiety, right, something that's negative, that's consistent, now we have to take a look and say, okay, where are the imbalances and what led us down that journey? So the connection from physical well-being is when we look at I'm going to lump it all into mood disorders. I'm just going to label it that way for the moment. We look at brain chemistry. So we produce certain neurotransmitters such as dopamine, GABA, acetylcholine, serotonin. And if there's an imbalance in those neurotransmitters, we don't feel good. And I describe it as like a seesaw, teeter-totter on the playground. We have excitatory neurotransmitters and we have inhibitory neurotransmitters. And when you put one of each on the teeter-totter, we now can play because it's balanced. But if we're too far on one side or the other, that's where we start to go down that path of having the symptoms more regularly. Then it gets more complicated because we produce a lot of those neurotransmitters in our gut. So you hear a lot in medicine about the gut-brain connection, and it's really true. If the gut isn't healthy, the brain isn't healthy, and sometimes we inhibit the ability to produce these neurotransmitters in our gut. Then I'm going to make it more complicated. because the precursors to our neurotransmitters are amino acids, and we get those from our proteins. So if we're not eating sufficient protein, or we're not able to digest or break down our protein well, now we don't have the tools to manufacture those hormones. And then let's make it even more complicated, just one more step. When we're feeling stressed out, and let's face it, we all have some levels of stress in our life, because stress can also be good. And we forget that, right? Marriage is good, marriage is bad. New job is good, new job is bad. Getting fired is good, maybe it's bad. It's perspective, right, on all of these life events as to whether they're good or bad events. And with the increased stress that we have in our life, that puts strain on our adrenal glands, two little glands that sit by our kidneys. They pump out steroid hormones. A couple of them are cortisol and DHEA, and it also manufactures norepinephrine and epinephrine. And those have a huge connection also to gut-brain health. So when we're under enormous amounts of stress, now we don't have what we call that fight or flight to fight the things that come into the body in order to recover. And then that can send us down the cascade. So our bodies are wildly intricate and interesting. And unfortunately, it's not like replacing one little tiny body part, but when you look at gut, brain, adrenals, and even other functions, any little piece that can be broken can send us down on that cascade that really can support or really diminish our mental health.
Yeah. And that's why we need people like you.
I'll keep working. I'm still at it.
Yeah. And, I want to go beyond medicine, if you're okay with that.
Sure.
Okay. Beyond science, So, and once again, you may pass on any question that I ask.
Okay.
I'm curious, is there a connection between chiropractic and spirituality?
Sure.
Can you say more, please?
It's interesting because we get patients in sometimes where they need to be educated, and they say, I don't believe in chiropractic. And my response is, well, chiropractic is not a religion. You don't actually have to believe in chiropractic itself. But I do think we have to believe, or we choose to believe, in the ability for our bodies to heal, right? And for whatever power we all believe in, because I know it's different for different people, and that's okay, for whatever power we believe in to help facilitate that healing process as well. It's interesting and it doesn't happen often in my office, but there's a handful of patients over the years that I can tell you aren't going to get well. I know they're not going to get well. And part of the reason they don't get well is that inability to open themselves up somewhat spiritually. And again, I do believe there's multiple levels of this, to the fact that, what made the body can heal the body.
Yeah.
And we do have that capability. And if you honestly believe you are going to stay sick, you are going to stay sick. So whether it's, and I think it's true of all branches of medicine. I don't think chiropractic is alone in that. We tend to fall into that category probably a little bit more often, but I think all branches of life and medicine, when you open yourself up that way spiritually to believe, it's amazing what gifts you get back.
Yeah,
truly.
I can imagine. And from what you all do, you all know so much about the human body. You all know more than the rest of us that this thing is not accidental, right, Joe? Yeah.
No.
So, in your work, and I've studied you a little bit, and in your work, though, it seems to me that you share about adversity and resilience. So can you talk with us about some of the things that you've learned about both of them?
Sure.
About adversity and also about resilience.
Sure. So adversity is coming. I don't think we have a choice. I don't know how to walk through 100 years of life without something bad happening, right? I haven't met anybody yet who doesn't have a story to share in that regard. So one of the challenges I like to put out for people is, not to ask for it, right? Like I didn't ask for cancer, and I'm not asking for bad things to happen to anybody. But when it does show itself at my doorstep, I'm going to welcome it. And I'm going to welcome it because I know that there is something I can learn from it if I choose to. So if I go with it, with open arms and say, okay, this is what you brought me, let's see what the gifts are, and let's see what I'm going to learn, I'm able to walk through it better, stronger, sometimes faster, sometimes not, but with gifts on the other end. And that's where I think it's very closely tied to actually being resilient, because I know, right? I know that if I can get over this, I can get over the next one. Because because I learned from that. I joke when you look in the financial world, right? Like a lot of the gurus out there that are consulting and writing books on how to become wealthy and, become millionaires, they all have the failure.
Yeah.
Right. They were all bankrupt at one time or, lost everything, with whatever their story is. And they came back, right?
Mm-hmm.
They came back. And now they're teaching other people how to overcome that adversity and be resilient too. So it doesn't matter, health, money, spirituality, you can replace any of those words in that conversation, right? But the more you welcome it, the more you show yourself that you can plow through it, the more you learn from it to do it better the next time.
Yeah.
That's what builds the resiliency. And I still have a long way to go. I mean, I joke I'm going to be 112 when I die. That's my magic number. And I'm almost at midlife. So I got a lot more stuff that's going to come at me, I'm sure. And every time I get stronger and stronger and better at this.
Wow, I love it, because what you've just told me is that each one of us has the opportunity to become positively altered. I love it. Now,
It's a choice. It's a choice.
Okay.
It's a choice. You don't have to be altered at all if you don't want to, but I think life is a whole lot better when we are.
I love it. And look, so I think I saw somewhere where you either, I'm not sure if it was a blog or a speech or whatever, you said, and if I got this wrong, correct me, that there's an inner superhero that each of us has. Did I make that up or?
No.
Okay. What's that about?
Yeah. So I was Wonder Woman. That was my mantra through this journey. And I think we all really do sort of have this superpower, right? And maybe it's the gift of communication, or maybe it's motivation, or maybe it's just teaching somebody a new skill set. And all of those in a sense are really superpowers, right?
Yeah,
it's a way to save the day or save someone or motivate someone or, inspire. And when we recognize what our gifts are, because we all have something, we all do. When we recognize that inner superhero power and use it for good and not evil, now we put on the cape and we shine.
Yeah. Now, you also teach about, and you share about, limiting beliefs. And that is not that we should wear them, but how to get. So you tell us, what have you learned about limiting beliefs and how people can get rid of them, recognize and get rid of them?
Right. It's changing the language, right? So if I am never going to get well, if I am not good enough, right? If I am not smart enough, whatever those I am messages are that are in the negative connotation, I created those, right? Nobody else has the power to determine that for me except myself. So I'm an enormous fan of what I call these I am statements. I am beautiful. I am sexy. I am smart. I am strong. I am powerful. I am funny. Whatever those I ams are, I believe because I say them out loud and become exactly what I know I am. But if I sit here and I say I am ugly and I am stupid and I am not worth it, you know what? That's true too. Becomes true. And let's just take beauty, for example. When I can sit here and say I am beautiful, there are going to be people that look at my picture and go, she's not that pretty. And that's okay, because their perception of beauty may or may not be what I look like. But if I believe I am beautiful, whether it's external or internal, and hopefully both, and I believe that, then really other people's opinions become somewhat irrelevant from the standpoint of how I move through my decisions in my life. And you're entitled to your opinion. I don't want to take that away. But it is the language that we teach ourselves. So those limiting beliefs really are our own fault. Now, sometimes we get them externally, right? It's the parent that gives the wrong messages or the boss that gives the wrong messages. And that's where I also believe sometimes we have to be able to say, okay, this message doesn't work for me. And that's where sometimes it is okay to walk away from certain people or certain situations in your life that deliver those messages as well. If you're not able to separate so that you don't hold on to them.
Understood. Look, you've also shared about the power of love. What are you trying to convey to us when you connect power to love?
Yeah, there's an inner strength I feel that I have gained when I have truly given myself the opportunity to be honest, transparent, true to myself in terms of who I am with another human being. And I think there's many levels of love. You know, we think sometimes of love of family, right? You know, we're sort of born into that, sort of a rule. Picking a partner, which is also very important, but sometimes it's just friendships. And sometimes there's even, you know, love. Like I would tell you, I have a love for my patients. It's not a romantic love, but it's a love for who they are as humans and, you know, the goals that we're trying to achieve together. And when you're willing to open up and acknowledge that that's a real, true, raw emotion and not be afraid of it, the gifts that come from that too are very strong.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of us get burned and then close that door. And it's very sad to me because there's no guarantee we're not going to get hurt. That's part of the adversity and the resilience again.
Indeed. Opportunity to be positively altered again.
Correct.
So I think you've also connected power to friendship. What do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I think the gift of friendship is enormous. You know, family, we don't always pick, right? You're born into it. And friendship is a choice to a certain degree, right? We pick our friends. There's a enormous, I hate to keep using the word gift, but I'm going to use it anyway. There's an enormous gift when somebody is willing to show up for you in a selfless way, because it's something that you need at that moment. But what's amazing about that friendship is when you realize back that when somebody steps up for you, you're probably also doing something for them that they may or may not know that they needed. There's an enormous power in that relationship that could last moments and it could last years.
Yeah. Yeah. So at some point, well, I don't know, when were you drawn to public speaking? Was this something that came out of high school, for example? Oh, well, yeah.
Right. So I think actually it might have been college. You know, I joined one of those, and I forget what they're called, you know, the speaking groups where you learn how to stand up, right? You know, and you're just horrified and mortified because, you know, it's, you know, most people's least favorite thing to do. And as much as I didn't necessarily enjoy it in that setting, what happened for me is Dr. Frank Stroll, who again I alluded to earlier in our conversation, was teaching. And when he fell ill, he asked me if I would take his place. And I was terrified, right? I was like, oh, you know, how am I going to do this? And what if I don't know what I'm talking about? Anyway, I said yes, because I always say yes to challenges, because, you know, what's the worst thing that can happen? I flop and I don't do it again, right? And what I recognized is when I step on stage, and there is this connection of a couple things that happen. One, people are actually paying to listen to me. I have 3 kids that don't listen to me, right? So now there are people in the audience that actually pay money to hear what I have to say. So that was an interesting, you know, win for me, if you will. But there was this electricity that I got from the energy of an audience or a question that's asked or a comment that allowed me to then share back or say something funny to lighten the mood. And it's that exchange of energy in a room with people that just lit me up. And I knew from that moment on that, like, this is just, it jazzes me. It's a high like nothing else I experience. And I've been doing it now for, oh boy, about 15, 16 years.
Wow.
I travel all over the country, you know, as small an audience as 30, as big of an audience as, you know, 3,000-4,000. And the intimacy as well as the big room still provides an energy that I just really love. It's one of those things that if I have time and I can do it, the answer is yes.
Wow, that's nice. So what would you say is your core message or core messages?
Yeah. Do it. You know, whatever you're challenged with, you know, look to say yes, right, in your life, number one. 2, I really want you to build a team. It's really important, whether that is family, friends, practitioners, animals. I don't care who, you know, you bring in your inner circle, but really build a team to help you walk through life and recognize that sometimes those team members change. You know, got to face the adversity. That's a big message for me. Please laugh at yourself, with others, not at others, but with others. Laugh at the situations. You know, there's numerous studies that show us that laughter can get us through, you know, many obstacles. And then really be reflective. You know, I would love to tell you everything I do in my life I learned from. That's probably not, I'm probably quite not that attentive, but at the end of the day, I really sit down and I think, how did I do today? Did I make some good choices? Did I affect people the way I wanted to? How did I do for myself? And if the answer to that question is I did great, I fall asleep, start the day the next day, trying to do the same way. If I reflect and I think, wow, maybe I hurt somebody's feelings or I didn't make the right decision. I could have done something even better for myself. I still fall asleep really quickly because I do sleep well. But it gives me an opportunity to say, you know what, tomorrow's really a gift that I get to try to do this a little bit differently and a little bit bigger and a little bit better. So that reflection, I think, is really important for us as humans too, to have in order to facilitate that growth. So there's really tons of messages, and it's all just wrapped up into like, let's move through this life in a way that we can have some fun and enjoy it.
I get it. Can you think of one memorable moment you had as a platform speaker?
Oh, the first thing I think about, and it's not a very specific example, but I actually love when something comes out of my mouth that's kind of inappropriate, that I didn't mean it to be, and somebody calls me out on it and we get a good laugh from it.
Okay.
Sometimes people hear things differently, right? And then it's just fun because it becomes a laughter about me, that self-deprecating humor. If I can go, oh, I definitely screwed that up and said that wrong. And I think it gives others in the audience that ability to realize too, that when we do screw something up, we just have to laugh and it's okay. It doesn't have to be life altering when we make a mistake.
I like it as permission to be human. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. But look, there are a couple of other things. We're almost done.
Okay.
There are a couple of the other things that I want people to know about you that they may not know if they're watching or listening to you on our podcast. But I think I discovered that you were once, or maybe still are, a dancer.
Yes. So that was the dream when I was young. The dream was to become a professional dancer and eventually a choreographer in New York.
Oh.
And it was interesting because when I was looking at colleges, I got accepted to New York University, which was the dream school in the dance program, and I did not get accepted academically. And my father said to me, I am not paying for college for you to get a certificate and not a degree. And I went, okay. So I picked a different school. And I wound up starting my college career at Arizona State as a dance major, wound up transferring to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And when I graduated, I did dance professionally for a couple years. And then I learned that I actually kind of liked money a little bit. Not a whole lot of money in that profession unless you get very lucky. You wait a lot of tables, you live in a studio apartment. And not that I needed a lot of money, but I wanted to be able to put food on the table. So I wound up jumping out of that, as a profession, and I miss it to a certain degree. And I'm grateful for some of it too, because I'm also in a profession now that I absolutely love. Now it's just dancing around with the kids or in the kitchen when nobody's looking, when the music is playing. And, I'd still tell you I'm a dancer, just don't get paid for it.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Now, this one surprised me, and I wasn't sure if people get this. I read that you once were or are a power lifter.
Yes.
Okay, so tell me about that. What attracted you to powerlifting? How did that go?
It's an interesting sport to couple with dancing, right? So I was always very interested and belonged to a gym in high school, loved the weight training, was very active in the gym. And when I was at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, I wound up meeting a couple of guys that competed in powerlifting. And I'm watching them lift ridiculously heavy weights and the grunting and the noise. And I don't know what it was that kind of jazzed me about that, but it did. And they got me involved in the lifting and eventually took me to some competitions. And yes, I did wear the ugly wrestling singlet. It was not a very feminine look, certainly. But again, being a very competitive person, it was just that idea that not only could I compete against others, but I was also really competing against myself, right? Lift more, do something better, beat my own records. And it became something really fun that I did through college.
Do you still lift?
I do still lift. The powerlifting is long gone. The knees are, a little bit older and can't quite take the heavy weights anymore. But yes, I absolutely enjoy still being in the gym. It's a fun place for me.
Well, look, I've had a good time, Dr. Howard, talking with you. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I appreciate all the questions and the interest, and I enjoyed it as well. So thank you.
Uh-huh. You've been listening to the Possibility Action Network podcast. Our guest today has been Dr. Howard. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton. Until next time, good day